The annual tech summit in Silicon Valley was always a spectacle, but this year promised something different. The air buzzed with anticipation as industry giants and political heavyweights gathered in the grand ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over the crowd dressed in their finest attire. Elon sat in the back of his electric car, scrolling through his phone as his driver navigated through the evening traffic. He hadn't planned on attending the summit this year. His companies demanded constant attention, and public appearances rarely topped his priority list. But the email he'd received 3 days ago changed everything. "Sir, we're 5 minutes away," his driver announced, glancing at him through the rearview mirror. Elon nodded, tucking his phone into his pocket. The mysterious email had contained documents, old government files that shouldn't have been accessible to anyone outside top security clearance. Files that contained information about Hillary Clinton's early career that contradicted everything the public knew. He'd spent days verifying the information, calling contacts, cross-referencing dates and events. Everything checked out. The question wasn't whether the information was real, it was why someone had sent it to him, and what they expected him to do with it. The car pulled up to the red carpet entrance. Camera flashes lit up the night as reporters recognized his vehicle. Elon straightened his tie and prepared his usual half-smile for the cameras. "Mr. Musk, over here," reporters called out as he stepped onto the carpet. He waved politely but didn't stop for questions. Inside, the ballroom hummed with conversation. Tech CEOs clustered in groups, politicians worked the room shaking hands, and servers weaved through the crowd with trays of champagne. Elon grabbed a glass of water from a passing tray and scanned the room. His contact had promised to meet him here, someone who claimed to have more information than what was in those files. "Didn't expect to see you here," a voice said behind him. Elon turned to find Jackson, an old colleague from his PayPal days. "Last-minute decision," Elon replied. "Well, you picked an interesting night. Word is Hillary Clinton's making a surprise appearance." Elon nearly choked on his water. "Is that confirmed?" Jackson nodded. "Her team arrived an hour ago. Some big announcement about a new tech initiative she's backing." This couldn't be coincidence. Whoever sent those files knew she would be here tonight. They wanted a confrontation. As if on cue, the crowd near the entrance shifted. Secret Service agents appeared first, forming a perimeter as Hillary Clinton entered the room, smiling and greeting familiar faces. Elon watched her work the room with practiced ease. Nobody here knew what he knew. The documents revealed connections to projects from the nineties that had been buried deep, projects that crossed ethical lines and violated trust. If true, it would rewrite public understanding of her early political career. His phone vibrated in his pocket. A text from an unknown number, back corner. "Blue tie. 2 minutes." Elon looked across the room and spotted a man in a navy suit with a blue tie standing alone by a large potted plant. Their eyes met briefly before the man turned and walked toward a side exit that led to the hotel gardens. This was his chance to understand why these secrets had landed in his lap. As he made his way across the room, following the mysterious figure, he felt the weight of the decision ahead. Going public with such information would cause a storm unlike anything he'd faced before. The cool night air hit his face as he stepped into the garden. String lights illuminated the stone pathways between carefully manicured hedges. The man in the blue tie stood with his back to him, looking out over the city lights below. "I assume you verified what I sent you," the man said without turning around. "I have," Elon replied. "What I don't understand is why me." "And why now?" The man turned slowly. His face was weathered, eyes carrying the look of someone who had seen too much. "Because in 3 days, she's going to announce her involvement in a new regulation committee that would cripple your companies. And because you're the only person with enough public influence to make people listen when this comes out." Before Elon could respond, the garden doors opened again. Both men turned to see Hillary Clinton herself walking toward them, flanked by a single Secret Service agent who kept a respectful distance. "Mr. Musk," she called out with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I was hoping to speak with you tonight." As she approached, the man in the blue tie slipped a flash drive into Elon's hand and whispered, "Everything else you need is here." Then he nodded politely to Clinton and walked past her back into the ballroom. Elon pocketed the drive as Hillary reached him, extending her hand. I understand congratulations are in order for your latest launch. Quite impressive. Thank you, he replied, shaking her hand while studying her face. Did she know what he had discovered? What was on this drive? I wanted to personally invite you to join a discussion about the future of AI regulation, she continued. Your input would be invaluable. The irony wasn't lost on him. According to the files, her past included secretly undermining the very type of innovation she now claimed to support. I'd be interested to hear more about your vision for that, Elon said carefully. Wonderful. Perhaps we could discuss it inside. I'm making the announcement in 15 minutes. As they walked back toward the ballroom, Elon felt the flash drive pressing against his leg through his pocket. Whatever was on it, he knew the next 15 minutes would determine whether those secrets stayed buried or were exposed to the world. Hillary stopped just before they reached the doors and turned to him. You know, Mr. Musk, I've always admired how you speak your mind, regardless of consequences. That's rare these days. Their eyes met, and for just a moment, Elon wondered if there was a veiled message in her words. A warning, perhaps. The truth matters, he replied simply. Yes, she said with a smile that didn't warm her eyes. But whose truth? As they re-entered the bright lights of the ballroom, Elon knew he had minutes to decide what to do with the information in his possession. The room was now packed, with all eyes turning toward the stage where Hillary would soon speak. The countdown had begun. The ballroom had transformed into a sea of expectant faces. Waitstaff hurried to clear glasses as the event coordinator tapped the microphone at the podium. Elon found himself escorted to a front row seat, the flash drive burning a hole in his pocket. Ladies and gentlemen, the coordinator announced, please welcome our surprise guest speaker, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Applause rippled through the room as Hillary took the stage, her cream-colored pantsuit catching the stage lights. She smiled warmly, waving to familiar faces in the crowd. Elon felt his phone vibrate again. Another message from the unknown number. Check the drive now. Third file. With Hillary beginning her speech about innovation and the future, Elon discreetly pulled out his phone and connected the flash drive using an adapter. He opened the third file while keeping his head slightly bowed, as if taking notes. The document that loaded made his breath catch. It was a scanned memo from 1998, stamped classified with Hillary's signature at the bottom. It detailed a covert operation to suppress emerging tech that threatened established government surveillance systems. The memo specifically mentioned shutting down 3 promising startups through regulatory pressure and mysterious funding problems. Elon recognized one of the company names immediately. It had been a competitor to PayPal in the early days that suddenly went bankrupt despite solid funding. He'd always wondered what happened. On stage, Hillary was now talking about responsible AI development. We must ensure that innovation serves humanity, not the other way around, she said, her voice confident and measured. That's why I'm announcing the formation of the Advanced Technology Oversight Committee, which will work with industry leaders to establish new regulatory frameworks. Elon scrolled down and found a list of companies targeted for the first wave of new regulations. His companies topped the list. The room felt suddenly warm as he weighed his options. Going public meant warfare with one of the most connected political figures in America. Staying silent meant watching his life's work potentially destroyed by someone who had secretly worked against innovation for decades. And I'm pleased to announce, Hillary continued, that we've already secured commitments from several major tech leaders to join this initiative. A slide appeared on the screen behind her with logos of tech giants. His companies were conspicuously absent. Elon closed the file and pocketed his phone, a decision crystallizing in his mind. He caught the eye of the man in the blue tie, now standing at the back of the room. The man gave an almost imperceptible nod. Hillary was wrapping up her speech. And now, I'd like to open the floor for questions. I believe Mr. Musk had something he wanted to discuss. The spotlight suddenly swung to Elon. This wasn't coincidence. She knew something was happening. She was trying to control the narrative by putting him on the spot. He rose slowly, feeling hundreds of eyes upon him. Tech journalists leaned forward, sensing something unexpected. Cameras turned his way. Thank you, Secretary Clinton, he began, his voice calm despite the pounding in his chest. Your commitment to technological progress is admirable. He paused, meeting her gaze directly. Something flickered behind her eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps. However, he continued, I believe true progress requires transparency about our past actions as well as our future intentions. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Hillary's smile remained fixed, but her knuckles whitened as she gripped the podium. I recently came across some historical documents that raise questions about the relationship between government and tech innovation. Elon's voice remained measured. Documents that suggest certain officials actively worked to undermine companies they viewed as threats to established power structures. The room fell completely silent. Even the waitstaff froze in place. Would you care to comment on Operation Blackout from 1998? Elon asked, referencing the project name from the memo. Hillary's composure slipped for just a fraction of a second, barely noticeable to most, but unmistakable to Elon. She recovered quickly, her political training kicking in. I'm afraid I'm not familiar with what you're referring to, she replied smoothly. Perhaps we could discuss this privately after the event? I'm sure there's a misunderstanding. Elon reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. I have the memo right here, with your signature authorizing the shutdown of 3 tech companies that were developing encryption the government couldn't break. Would you like me to share it with the room? The silence deepened. A journalist in the second row was frantically typing on her phone. Secret Service agents at the edges of the room shifted uncomfortably. Hillary's PR director appeared at the side of the stage, looking alarmed. But Hillary waved him off, her political instincts taking over. Mr. Musk, she said with a slight laugh, I've signed thousands of documents over my career. Without seeing what you're referring to, I can't possibly comment. But I assure you, I've always supported American innovation. Then you wouldn't mind if I shared this with the journalists here? Elon asked, his finger hovering over his phone screen. Because I have 6 more files that tell a very different story about your relationship with Silicon Valley. A bead of sweat appeared on Hillary's forehead despite the room's air conditioning. The crowd was completely still, collectively holding its breath. The tech CEOs in attendance exchanged nervous glances. Many had their own histories with government intervention. The man in the blue tie had disappeared from his spot at the back of the room. Elon was on his own now. The floor is watching, Secretary Clinton, Elon said, his voice cutting through the silence. What would you like me to do with these files? For the first time in her decades-long political career, Hillary Clinton seemed genuinely at a loss for words. The room remained dead silent, waiting for her response. For 5 excruciating seconds, Hillary Clinton stood frozen at the podium. The silence in the ballroom was so complete you could hear the gentle hum of the air conditioning. Her practiced smile remained, but her eyes had turned cold and calculating. Then, surprising everyone, she laughed. Well, Mr. Musk, she said, her voice echoing through the sound system, you certainly know how to command a room's attention. She stepped away from the podium, moving closer to the edge of the stage. In my 30 years of public service, I've been accused of everything from murder to running a secret pizza restaurant operation. I suppose adding tech company saboteur to the list was inevitable. The audience remained tense, unsure whether to laugh along or maintain the silence. I'm not accusing you of anything, Elon replied calmly. I'm simply asking about your signature on a document that exists. Operation Blackout wasn't a conspiracy theory, it was a real government program. Hillary's PR director was now frantically signaling from the side of the stage, drawing his finger across his throat in the universal cut this off gesture. But Hillary waved him away again. You know what? Let's see it, she said with sudden directness. If you have something with my signature, put it on the screen for everyone. It was a calculated risk on her part, either calling his bluff or controlling the reveal herself. Elon hadn't expected this response, but he recovered quickly. Happily, he said, and nodded to a young woman sitting 3 rows back, his assistant, who had been quietly filming the exchange. She stood, walked to the AV technician, and handed over a drive. This contains the unclassified portion of the documents, Elon explained to the room. The full files include sensitive information that should go through proper channels before public release. The tech CEOs in the front row shifted uncomfortably. Many had their own government contracts and understood the delicate line between transparency and national security. The large screen behind the stage flickered, and then the memo appeared, letterhead, classification stamps, and Hillary Clinton's unmistakable signature at the bottom. The parts describing the actual operation were redacted, but the companies targeted were clearly visible. TerraCrypt, NetShield, Quantum Communications, Elon read aloud. 3 companies developing encryption technology that disappeared overnight in 1998. Their founders were pressured, their funding dried up, and their patents were acquired by government contractors. He turned to face the audience. I know because I tried to buy TerraCrypt when they were suddenly selling assets at pennies on the dollar. The founder told me he couldn't explain why, but that I should stay away if I wanted to keep building PayPal. Hillary's expression had hardened, her political mask slipping just slightly. Those were different times, Mr. Musk. The latent entities presented unique national security challenges. It was as close to an admission as anyone had ever heard. Different times, Elon repeated. Yet here we are with your new committee targeting today's innovators using remarkably similar language. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Journalists were typing frantically, and several were already on calls with their editors. The point isn't to drag up ancient history, Elon continued. The point is that the same people who secretly undermined innovation then are positioning themselves as the appropriate guardians of innovation now. Hillary's PR director had given up on signals and was now on stage, whispering urgently in her ear. She nodded once, then returned to the microphone. This event clearly isn't the appropriate forum for discussing classified operations, even decades-old ones, she said, her voice steady but lacking its earlier warmth. I'd be happy to address these concerns through proper channels. That's exactly what the founder of TerraCrypt was told, Elon countered. He died waiting for those proper channels to address his concerns. A collective gasp went through the room. This was no longer merely uncomfortable, it was explosive. The event coordinator rushed to the stage, trying desperately to regain control. Perhaps we should move to the networking portion of our evening, he suggested, his voice strained. But the audience was riveted. Tech pioneers who had built empires weren't accustomed to being silenced, and the journalists sensed a career-making story unfolding. Before we end this discussion, Elon said, I have one question. Will your new committee operate with full transparency, or will we discover its real activities 20 years from now? Hillary's smile returned, but it didn't reach her eyes. Mr. Musk, I've always admired your passion, if not your diplomatic skills. The committee will operate with appropriate transparency within the bounds of national security. She gestured to the screen still showing the memo. And as for this document, I look forward to discussing its context with appropriate oversight bodies, not in a hotel ballroom. With that, she nodded to the audience and stepped away from the microphone. Her security detail immediately moved in, creating a barrier as they escorted her toward a side exit. The ballroom erupted into chaotic conversation. Journalists rushed toward Elon, shouting questions, while tech executives huddled in shocked discussion. Elon felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to find a tall man with a Department of Justice badge. Mr. Musk, the agent said quietly, we need to discuss the classified materials in your possession. Across the room, through the moving crowd, Elon caught a final glimpse of Hillary being ushered out a service door. For just a moment, their eyes met. Her look wasn't angry, as he had expected, but something more complex, a mixture of respect and warning. The tech summit had just become ground zero for what would surely be the biggest whistleblower story since Snowden. As cameras flashed around him and the DOJ agent guided him toward a quieter area, Elon knew there would be no going back. The revolution in Silicon Valley was about to face its greatest test, and he had just fired the first shot. I need all copies of those documents, Mr. Musk, the Justice Department agent said as he led Elon into an empty conference room away from the chaos of the ballroom. 2 more agents stood by the door, preventing journalists from following. Elon sat calmly at the conference table. I understand your position, but I've already uploaded everything to secure servers with Deadman switches. Detaining me won't contain this. The lead agent, who had introduced himself as Agent Thompson, sighed heavily and took the seat across from him. We're not detaining you. But those documents, regardless of age, are still classified. Classifying evidence of wrongdoing doesn't make the wrongdoing disappear, Elon replied. The public has a right to know when government powers are abused. Outside, they could hear the commotion as guests departed en masse, many already on their phones spreading news of what had happened. The tech summit had effectively ended, but its impact was just beginning. Agent Thompson's phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression shifting subtly. "The secretary would like to speak with you. Privately. Hillary Clinton wants to meet now." Elon asked, surprised. "That's unexpected." "Not the former Secretary of State," Thompson clarified. "The current Secretary of Defense." 20 minutes later, Elon found himself in a secure room in the hotel's executive wing. The Secretary of Defense, a former general with a reputation for blunt honesty, sat across from him. No aides, no recording devices, just two powerful men and a table between them. "That was quite a show downstairs," the secretary began, his voice gravelly from years of command. "Not how I expected this evening to go." "Nor I," Elon admitted, "but sometimes moments choose us." The secretary nodded thoughtfully. "Operation Blackout was before my time, but I know enough about it to understand why certain people are having heart palpitations right now." "Do you realize what you've started?" "I believe I do," Elon said. "The question is whether you're here to shut it down or to help guide it toward real change." For a long moment, the secretary studied him, weighing something in his mind. Then he reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder with red security borders. "This contains information on 12 operations similar to Blackout, spanning 4 administrations, both parties," he said, placing it on the table but keeping his hand firmly on top. "If what you care about is exposing government overreach regardless of political affiliation, this would interest you." Elon looked at the folder, then back at the secretary's face. "Why would you show me this?" "Because some of us have been fighting this battle from the inside for years," the secretary replied. "Clinton was just one player in a much larger system, a system that's grown beyond any single person's control." Outside the room, phones were already buzzing with news alerts about Elon's confrontation with Hillary. Social media was exploding with clips filmed by audience members. The information was spreading faster than anyone could contain it. "The committee Clinton was announcing tonight," the secretary continued, "was just the public face of something much more invasive already in motion. Some of us have been trying to bring transparency, but you needed a public catalyst," Elon finished for him. "Someone outside the system." The secretary didn't confirm or deny, but his expression said enough. What happens next is crucial. If this becomes just another partisan fight, nothing changes. The system absorbs the shock and continues. Elon's phone vibrated with incoming calls and messages, his team alerting him to the media firestorm already building. He silenced it, focusing on the moment. "What are you suggesting?" he asked. "A controlled burn instead of a wildfire," the secretary replied. "Work with us. Help expose the whole system, not just Clinton's part in it. Real reform, not just headlines." The offer was unexpected. Elon had prepared for threats, not partnership. "How do I know this isn't just another containment strategy?" The secretary finally removed his hand from the classified folder. "Take this, review it. My contact information is inside. You'll see that this goes far beyond partisan politics." As Elon reached for the folder, the door opened. Agent Thompson stood there with a concerned expression. "Sir," he addressed the secretary, "the White House is calling an emergency meeting, and Mrs. Clinton's team has issued a statement calling the documents sophisticated forgeries." The secretary stood, straightening his tie. Already playing the fake news card. Predictable. He turned to Elon. "You have 48 hours before this turns into a political circus that buries the truth forever. I hope you'll call." With that, he left, leaving Elon alone with the classified folder and a decision that would affect not just his companies, but potentially the entire relationship between technology and government. When Elon finally emerged from the hotel through a service entrance, he found his driver waiting, looking nervous. The main entrances swarmed with reporters, the driver explained as they pulled away. "Your phone's been going crazy. Your chief of staff called 6 times." Elon nodded, his mind still processing everything. The secure folder sat beside him, its contents potentially more explosive than what he'd already revealed. As they drove through the night, his phone lit up with a text from an unknown number, the same one that had contacted him during the event. "Well played. But watch your back. This goes deeper than you know." Minutes later, breaking news alerts reported that Hillary Clinton had cancelled all upcoming appearances due to a sudden illness. The wheels of damage control were already turning. The next 48 hours would determine whether Elon had sparked a momentary scandal or a fundamental shift in power. As Silicon Valley's skyline receded in the rear window, he opened the classified folder and began to read. Whatever path he chose now, there would be no going back to the world as it had been just hours before. Dawn was breaking over Elon's Palo Alto home when he finally closed the classified folder. He hadn't slept, spending the night reviewing documents that painted a disturbing picture spanning decades. Operation Blackout was merely one small piece of a much larger puzzle, a systematic campaign to control emerging technologies that threatened established power structures. The documents detailed how both Republican and Democratic administrations had participated in these operations. It wasn't about politics, it was about power. His home security system chimed, alerting him to visitors at the gate. The security feed showed 3 black SUVs. Government plates. "Sir," his head of security called through the intercom, "there are federal agents requesting to speak with you. They have a warrant." So it had begun. Elon had anticipated this. The system protecting itself. "Let them in," he replied calmly, "and initiate Protocol Omega." Protocol Omega was something he had established years ago for an emergency, a secure data distribution system that would activate if he were detained. The classified information would be sent to trusted journalists, tech leaders, and international figures who couldn't be easily silenced. As the agents approached his door, Elon's phone rang. It was the Secretary of Defense. "I told you that you had 48 hours, the secretary said when Elon answered. "It seems others weren't willing to wait. I'm sorry." "Are you behind this?" Elon asked directly. "No. The old guard is moving faster than I expected. They're claiming national security. Clinton has friends in high places still." The doorbell rang. Dawn was breaking over Elon's Palo Alto home when he finally closed the classified folder. He hadn't slept, spending the night reviewing documents that painted a disturbing picture spanning decades. Operation Blackout was merely one small piece of a much larger puzzle, a systematic campaign to control emerging technologies that threatened established power structures. The documents detailed how both Republican and Democratic administrations had participated in these operations. It wasn't about politics, it was about power. His home security system chimed, alerting him to visitors at the gate. The security feed showed 3 black SUVs, government plates. "Sir," his head of security called through the intercom, "there are federal agents requesting to speak with you. They have a warrant." So it had begun. Elon had anticipated this. The system protecting itself. "Let them in," he replied calmly, "and initiate Protocol Omega." Protocol Omega was something he had established years ago for an emergency, a secure data distribution system that would activate if he were detained. The classified information would be sent to trusted journalists, tech leaders, and international figures who couldn't be easily silenced. As the agents approached his door, Elon's phone rang. It was the Secretary of Defense. "I told you that you had 48 hours, the secretary said when Elon answered. "It seems others weren't willing to wait. I'm sorry." "Are you behind this?" Elon asked directly. "No. The old guard is moving faster than I expected. They're claiming national security. Clinton has friends in high places still." The doorbell rang. Elon could see 6 agents on his porch through the security feed. "What happens if they take me in?" Elon asked. "Best case. They scare you, get the documents back, and discredit you publicly. Worst case, you'll be tied up in classified legal proceedings for years. They can make people disappear into the legal system, Musk. Not physically gone, but effectively silenced." The doorbell rang again, more insistently. "I need allies," Elon said. "Check your secure email in 10 minutes. And whatever you do, don't surrender the original documents." The secretary hung up. Elon took a deep breath and opened his front door. The lead agent, a stern woman in her 50s, held up a badge and a document. "Mr. Musk, I'm Agent Winters with the FBI. We have a warrant to search these premises for classified materials illegally removed from government possession." Of course, Elon replied with surprising calm. But before you begin, I should inform you that I'm about to host a virtual press conference with tech leaders from 5 countries. It starts in 20 minutes. You're welcome to observe." The agent's confidence faltered slightly. This wasn't in her briefing. "What press conference?" she demanded. "The one where we discuss government suppression of innovation," Elon replied, "including this morning's attempt to intimidate me with an FBI raid." Agent Winters looked disturbed. "This isn't a raid, Mr. Musk. It's the lawful execution of a search warrant." "Semantics," Elon shrugged. "The cameras will see what they see." While agents began searching his home, Elon checked his secure email. The secretary had sent him a list of names, tech leaders, politicians from both parties, military officials, and journalists who were supposedly sympathetic to exposing the truth. Among them was a name that surprised him: the former head of the NSA, a person who had publicly clashed with Elon over encryption issues years ago. As the agents methodically went through his home, Elon sent messages to everyone on the list, not begging for help, but offering alliance. A unified front against decades of government overreach. Within minutes, responses began flooding in. Most expressed shock at the FBI presence at his home. News was already spreading. "Mr. Musk," Agent Winters approached him as he worked, "we need access to your personal devices and cloud accounts." "I'm afraid that won't be possible without specific authorization from a judge familiar with the sensitivity of my company's proprietary information," Elon replied. "My attorneys are already filing emergency motions. Until then, I cannot voluntarily provide access." Her face hardened. "This lack of cooperation will be noted." "As will this entire encounter," Elon responded, gesturing to the home security cameras. "The American people might find it interesting that questioning Hillary Clinton's past results in an FBI search within hours." As they reached this impasse, Elon's secure phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unexpected name on the secretary's list, the current vice president. "I should take this," Elon said to Agent Winters, holding up the phone so she could see the caller ID. Her eyes widened slightly. "Mr. Vice President," Elon answered, putting the call on speaker. "I'm currently hosting several FBI agents at my home. You're on speaker." There was a pause, then the vice president's distinctive voice filled the room. "Agent in charge, identifying yourself, please." Agent Winters looked stunned. "Sir, this is Special Agent Catherine Winters, FBI Counterintelligence." "Agent Winters, who authorized this operation?" the vice president asked. "Sir, we received authorization through standard channels based on evidence of classified material being." "That wasn't my question," the vice president cut in. "Who specifically authorized this?" "Because it wasn't the White House." The room fell silent. The other agents had stopped searching and were listening. "I'll need to check with my superiors, sir," Agent Winters finally replied. "Do that," the vice president said firmly. "And while you're checking, you should know that the president has just been briefed on a potential unauthorized operation targeting a private citizen who raised legitimate questions about government transparency. He's not pleased." After the call ended, the atmosphere in the house had changed completely. Agent Winters stepped outside to make calls, looking shaken. Elon used this moment to check the responses from the secretary's list. Nearly everyone had replied, and a clear majority were offering support. Even more surprising, news outlets were reporting that bipartisan congressional leaders were calling for investigations into Operation Blackout and similar programs. What had started as one man asking uncomfortable questions was rapidly becoming a movement. The system that had operated in shadows for decades was suddenly exposed to light from all directions. When Agent Winters returned, her demeanor had changed. "Mr. Musk, we've been instructed to conclude our search and withdraw pending further review of the warrant." As the agents filed out, Elon received another message, a meeting request from the president himself for the following morning. The game had changed. What began as Elon versus Hillary had evolved into something much more significant, a battle for the future relationship between government power and technological innovation. And for perhaps the first time, the innovators weren't standing alone. The White House seemed different at dawn. Elon had visited before for various technology summits, but never like this, entering through a side entrance, escorted by Secret Service agents, with no press, no announcements, no other tech leaders in sight. The morning news cycles were dominated by reports of the FBI's visit to his home. #Musk's deep state was trending worldwide. Clinton had released another statement calling it all dangerous misinformation designed to destabilize our democracy. Her supporters were rallying to her defense, while others demanded more transparency. "The president will see you now," an aide said, opening the door to the Oval Office. Elon was surprised to find not just the president waiting, but also the vice president, the secretary of defense, and two people he didn't immediately recognize. "Mr. Musk," the president greeted him, not rising from behind his desk. His expression was unreadable. "You've created quite a situation." "I merely asked questions, Mr. President," Elon replied. "The situation created itself through decades of secrecy and overreach." The president gestured to a chair. "Please sit, we have much to discuss." As Elon took his seat, the president introduced the two strangers. "This is Director Chen, who heads our National Intelligence Office, and Judge Rivera from the FISA court." Both nodded at Elon without warmth. Their presence suggested this wasn't going to be a friendly chat. "Let me be direct," the president began. "The documents you possess contain information that, if fully disclosed, could damage ongoing intelligence operations and potentially put lives at risk." "With respect, sir," Elon countered, "I've reviewed them carefully. They're decades old. The only thing they endanger is careers built on controlling rather than enabling innovation." Director Chen leaned forward. "You're not qualified to make that assessment, Mr. Musk. No matter how successful your companies are, you don't have the security clearance or context to understand what's at stake." Actually, the Secretary of Defense interjected, "He may understand better than most. The tech suppression operations detailed in those files directly impacted his early career." And he's right. These are old operations whose exposure risks embarrassment more than national security. The president studied the secretary with narrowed eyes. Clearly, there were divisions even within this small group. "What exactly do you want, Musk?" the president asked bluntly. It was the question Elon had prepared for all night. Complete transparency on past government interference in tech innovation, a bipartisan commission with real oversight powers, and a new framework for government tech relations moving forward, one that respects both national security and the public's right to privacy and innovation. Judge Rivera scoffed. "You're demanding policy changes after stealing classified documents and creating a public spectacle." "I didn't steal anything," Elon replied calmly. "The documents were sent to me by someone inside your system who clearly felt the public deserved to know." "A traitor," Director Chen muttered. "A whistleblower," Elon corrected. "And they're not alone. Since last night, I've been contacted by dozens of current and former officials offering more evidence." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't just about one tech leader and one set of documents. It was potentially the beginning of a massive exposure of decades of secret operations. The vice president, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. "Perhaps instead of arguing about how we got here, we should focus on where we go from here. The documents are already being discussed publicly. Clinton's attempts to dismiss them have only increased interest. Raiding Mr. Musk's home backfired spectacularly." The president nodded slowly, the political reality dawning. "What you're suggesting is essentially a controlled burn." "Exactly," the Secretary of Defense agreed. "We acknowledge the past, create new safeguards, and move forward. Fighting this will only make it worse, and frankly, sir, many of these operations happened under previous administrations. You have the opportunity to be the president who reformed the system, not the one who defended its excesses." The president turned to Judge Rivera. "Your thoughts from a legal perspective." The judge sighed heavily. "Classified is classified. But prosecuting someone like Musk over whistleblower documents would be a nightmare. The optics alone would be devastating. And public opinion is shifting rapidly," the vice president added. "Early polling shows strong bipartisan support for more transparency about government operations involving technology companies." Elon watched this debate with interest. The inner workings of power were being revealed, the calculations, the compromises, the realities behind the public faces. The president stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Washington Monument in the distance. For a long moment he said nothing. When he turned back, his decision was written on his face. "Two conditions," he said to Elon. "First, you work with us on reviewing the documents to redact anything that could genuinely put current operations or personnel at risk. Second, you publicly acknowledge that our administration is taking steps to address past wrongs and create better oversight." "And in return?" Elon asked. "A presidential commission on tech freedom with actual teeth, no charges related to the documents. And," he glanced at Director Chen, who looked displeased, "we investigate how Operation Blackout and similar programs impacted innovation and competition." It wasn't everything Elon wanted, but it was a start, an acknowledgement that the relationship between government and technology needed fundamental change. "One more thing," Elon said. "Hillary Clinton needs to answer questions about her role publicly, not just through press releases calling everything fake news." The president's expression tightened. "She's no longer in government. I can't compel her to do anything." "But you can make it clear that her denials aren't supported by your administration," Elon pressed. "The documents speak for themselves." After a tense silence, the president nodded once. "I'll have my press secretary state that the administration takes the documents seriously and is investigating their contents. That's as far as I'll go." As the meeting concluded, the vice president walked Elon to the door. "You've started something significant," he said quietly. "But be careful. Not everyone in Washington will accept change easily. Clinton has allies everywhere, and they're already working to discredit you." "Unused to powerful opposition," Elon replied with a slight smile. "In business and now in politics." "This isn't business," the vice president warned. "When you threatened her future plans with that tech committee, you made an enemy who's been navigating Washington power longer than you've been building rockets. Watch your back." Outside, the morning sun illuminated the White House grounds as Elon walked to his waiting car. His phone was filled with messages from tech leaders, journalists, and even members of Congress wanting statements, meetings, or alliances. The confrontation that began in a hotel ballroom had escalated into something that might fundamentally reshape the relationship between government power and technological innovation. As his car pulled away from the White House, Elon knew that while the meeting had gone better than expected, the real battle was just beginning. 3 weeks after the confrontation at the Tech Summit, Elon stood before a joint congressional hearing. The Grand Chamber was packed with legislators, media, and spectators. Cameras broadcast the proceedings worldwide as millions watched online. "Mr. Musk," the committee chairwoman began, "you've provided this committee with documents alleging decades of government interference in technological innovation. Could you explain, in simple terms, what you believe these documents show?" Elon leaned toward the microphone. "These aren't allegations. They're government records signed by officials at the highest levels. They show a systematic effort across multiple administrations to control emerging technologies that threatened established power structures, particularly around encryption, privacy, and communications." On the screens behind him, redacted versions of key documents appeared. The one that had started it all, Operation Blackout with Hillary Clinton's signature, was prominently displayed. "And how did you come into possession of these classified materials?" a senator asked. "They were sent to me by multiple whistleblowers within government who believe the American people deserve to know how innovation has been secretly suppressed," Elon replied. "I was approached because of my history of standing up to regulatory overreach." In the 3 weeks since the White House meeting, the story had evolved dramatically. Hillary Clinton had finally abandoned her fake document stance when faced with authentication by multiple experts. She now claimed she'd been following established policy directives and was being unfairly singled out. But the whistleblowers hadn't stopped with Elon. Encouraged by the administration's surprising openness, more came forward with documents about similar operations targeting breakthrough technologies in medicine, energy, and artificial intelligence. "Mr. Musk," another committee member asked, "some critics suggest you're only pursuing this because your companies would benefit from less government oversight. How do you respond?" Elon smiled slightly. "My companies already succeed despite the obstacles. This isn't about me. It's about the innovations we've lost, cures that were delayed, privacy tools that were suppressed, energy solutions that were sidelined. How many lives could have been improved or saved if government had protected innovation instead of controlling it?" The room fell silent as his words sank in. Even legislators who had come prepared to challenge him seemed thoughtful. In the gallery, Elon could see faces he recognized: the Secretary of Defense, tech leaders who had joined his coalition, journalists who had helped expose the truth. But one face was notably absent. Hillary Clinton had declined her invitation to testify, citing scheduling conflicts. The Presidential Commission on Technological Freedom begins its work next week, Elon continued. For the first time, we'll have genuine transparency and oversight of how government interacts with emerging technologies. This isn't about politics. The documents show both parties participated. It's about power, and whether that power serves the public or itself. After the hearing, Elon met privately with a bipartisan group of legislators who had supported the investigation. They gathered in a conference room away from cameras. The public response has been overwhelming, a senior congressman said. My office has never received so many calls supporting an issue. Because people instinctively understand what's at stake, Elon replied. When government secretly decides which innovations thrive and which die, we all lose. A senator who had initially been skeptical added, Clinton's team is still working overtime to make this about you personally rather than the documents. They're digging for anything to discredit you. They won't find much I haven't already shared publicly, Elon said with a shrug. My focus now is ensuring this momentum leads to real change. Later that evening, Elon returned to his hotel suite to find an unexpected visitor waiting, the mysterious man in the blue tie who had first given him the flash drive at the tech summit. You've done more than I hoped, the man said, rising from his seat. I wasn't sure you'd risk everything to pursue this. Who are you, really? Elon asked. You never identified yourself. The man smiled slightly. Just someone who worked inside the system long enough to see its flaws. Someone who was there when Operation Blackout destroyed promising technologies that might have changed the world. And Hillary Clinton, what was her real role? A willing participant, the man replied, but not the architect. She was ambitious, saw which way power flowed, and aligned herself accordingly. There were many like her in both parties. Elon walked to the window, looking out at the Washington Monument illuminated against the night sky. Will this really change anything? Or will they just create new, more secretive ways to control innovation? That depends on you and others like you, the man said. For the first time in decades, the public is aware of the problem. Tech leaders are united. Whistleblowers are coming forward. Even parts of government are pushing for reform. He moved toward the door but paused before leaving. Clinton's political future is finished, her committee plans demolished, her credibility damaged. But don't think this is over. The system didn't survive this long without being adaptable. After the man left, Elon received a video call from his team back in California. They had exciting news. Applications to work at his companies had tripled since his congressional testimony. Young engineers and scientists were inspired by his stand for innovation. We're already seeing changes, his chief of staff reported. Regulatory agencies that were stonewalling our projects suddenly want to cooperate. Legislators who never returned our calls are reaching out. It was a start, but Elon knew the real work lay ahead. The Presidential Commission would need to establish genuine transparency. The whistleblowers would need protection. The public would need to stay engaged once the initial excitement faded. As midnight approached, Elon received one final message from the president himself. History will remember what you started here. Make sure it finishes right. Standing on the balcony of his hotel room, looking out at the capital city where power had been concentrated for so long, Elon felt both the weight of responsibility and the excitement of possibility. The battle between innovation and control wasn't new, but for perhaps the first time, the innovators had the upper hand. The tech summit confrontation that had begun with a simple question about Hillary Clinton's past had evolved into something much larger, a watershed moment in the relationship between government power and human progress. Whatever happened next, there would be no returning to the comfortable shadows where decisions about our technological future had been made for decades. The truth, once exposed to light, had taken on a life of its own, and that, Elon realized, might be the most powerful innovation of all.